I'm Joe Rospars. As you heard, my pedigree on the campaign was running the digital operation, and you'd be forgiven for wondering what the heck I'm doing here. And it's not just because my team was responsible for Michelle Obama's Twitter and Facebook accounts for the last 2 years. I'm not actually a technical person either. The digital campaign, for those of you who work in marketing organizations, actually has very little to do with technology in many cases. It's a group of writers and designers and strategists and creative people and the analytics people behind them who make the program soar in a digital space. And our work at Blue State has been with the campaign, and obviously that's a big proof point for us in this model. Our team on the campaign, on the first campaign, was 100 people. Again, this sort of writers and filmmakers and designers and strategists online, producing the content and driving the engagement with these people who supported the president, who were willing to give a little bit of their time to drive an outcome. On the second campaign, the team wound up being more than 300 people because we followed the return on investment of putting our emphasis on people and the digital relationship with them from the first campaign in setting up our structure for the second one. The campaign, though, is the crucible of proof for what is possible now. In a campaign, you start from scratch at the beginning. You don't go in with an existing legacy marketing operation. You don't go in with a set of talent that's already been doing this and tired and run out of ideas. It's really a fresh start for a new organization, a new budget, new talent, and a finite window during which you can make something happen. So the campaign proves a lot of lessons about engagement and how organizations can invest in people, but ultimately the results of this approach are something that we see across industries. And so at Blue State Digital, we work not just with political campaigns and advocacy groups, but with nonprofits and museums and universities and brands to figure out how organizations can adapt to the digital challenge of the moment and engage the people who are most important to them to do big things, to build relationships between an organization and an individual, and also to build relationships between individuals within the context of an organization. And so we work with organizations on the advocacy side like Freedom to Marry or the NAACP on their membership engagement. But we also work with things that feel a little bit more like your industry, like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where we run engagements around their exhibitions to give people a tactile sense of the beauty of something that they'll see and touch at the Alexander McQueen exhibit. We've also worked in industry with brands, with Vogue, helping them re-architect their business model to make the brand soar online as much as it does in the pages of the magazine every month. And so through all of this, we have this unique perspective of trying to zero in on what is essentially the same problem at all of these organizations, whether it's a presidential campaign or a nonprofit or a brand. The essential question posed by the digital era is, how important are your people to you, and what are you going to do about it? And so across these different areas, we try to figure out how an organization can address itself to these challenges and the challenges of this moment. And so I want to leave you with a couple of things to think about as you go back to your day jobs after this program. The first is you have to set yourself up for success. And I spoke a little bit about this with the presidential campaign. It's this very unique thing that hopefully no one ever experiences in business, where you raise a bunch of money, in our case in 2012, $1 billion, spend it over 18 months, and then go out of business. And so that's not something that you want to do. But this notion of starting from scratch with a blank sheet of paper to say, I care about what I can get done in the next 18 months, and I'm going to build an organization no matter what the traditions or the personalities or the existing institutional baggage that exists in the rest of the industry of politics, where lots of organizations have been around for decades, including the Democratic Party itself. We're going to start from scratch and do something clean here and orient it towards the outcomes that can be achieved in the next 18 months. And that's something that, while every organization can't do that and indeed would want to do that, it's a thought exercise, and it's a set of experience that really raises a lot of questions about how we structure our marketing organizations and how we put people at the center of our institutions. And so there are many brands and businesses that have a notion of their customers from a sense of their sales, or from market research and focus groups talking to individual users, or even things like media companies have a notion of their audience and the count of them. But very rarely is there a notion of a person and the notion of an individual relationship with that person, which the digital age and the era where we are right now offers the opportunity. Every organization in here, whatever company you're going back to, has the opportunity to have an individual, intimate relationship with each one of your customers that feels and embodies the brand and the tone and the attributes that you want a brand to have, but on a personal level with each one of those people at scale. And that's the challenge for every organization, is to figure out how you're going to carry forward that notion of a person into your organization and build an intimate relationship with them at scale many millions of times over. And so thinking about where you put the content at the center of that relationship, not just content about the products, but the content about the relationship that you have with them. In our case, for the campaign, that meant not just telling people about how great Barack Obama was or his policy program or what he had done for the country, but also having a big conversation with people about the nature of the relationship we were trying to have with them. The same thing played out in our work with Vogue, where the relationship is not just about the content in the magazine, but you have an opportunity to build a conversation that feels like part of a community. And that doesn't have to be something that feels grassroots and campaigny in a brand like Vogue or a beauty product. What it needs to feel like is that you have the personal attention of the brand and the organization, and that you're an important part of it. The second thing I want to leave you with is that all of the business that you have people doing in your organization, whether it's a sale that you're making online or somebody consuming a piece of content that you're producing, the challenge in the digital age is to treat making that social as a big priority, almost as important as the sale or the consumption of that content itself. So anytime someone's buying something, anytime somebody's consuming a piece of content, how do you make that social? And I don't mean social in the sense of posting it on Facebook. I mean social in the sense that that person feels connected to your organization and then is going to be a representative for that out in their own personal social network. For us, that meant making sure that every time somebody donated to the campaign or agreed to volunteer, that they were telling their friends that they were donating to the campaign and telling their friends about the experience of volunteering. Again, going back to the Vogue example, this is something where not just understanding people's relationship to the brand and giving them a magazine or even giving them exclusive web content, but asking them about their relationship to the brand. One of the first things that happened in the new business model with Vogue back in 2011 was an ask, a very simple ask from Grace Coddington, where she wrote a note to all of the subscribers and people who were on the email list who had signed up for updates from Vogue but who might not have been subscribers about the first time that she picked up the magazine. And she talked about her experience as a young woman picking up this magazine that embodied for her the notion of fashion and what it meant to be a woman and fashion as an expression of culture. And she told this story, it was her own words, and we sent it out to people, hundreds of thousands of people, and asked them to tell their story about the first time they picked up the magazine. And what came back was, in part, it was many, many phone calls to Vogue's offices asking for Grace Coddington because people were very excited to hear from her. But what also happened was that thousands of people, she didn't like that. The other thing that happened, though, was that thousands of people wrote back with their personal stories of their relationship to that brand. And we heard stories about young people, a young woman who grew up in Texas, and where Vogue was the outlet to fashion in a world that she didn't know growing up, and she wound up going into the industry and became a professional thanks to this window that was provided by Vogue through her young life. We heard from another woman who lived in the U.S. now, but lived in post-revolutionary Iran in the early 80s. And how her experience then and her connection to the outside world as her country closed around her was the few copies of Vogue that her aunt would smuggle in from Europe when she came to visit. And thousands of stories like this from all walks of life, all types of people came back. And those were real anecdotes from that relationship that those people had with that brand over decades. Now, That's great for those individuals and their connection. That's a more intimate. You have just doubled down the relationship with that individual. But most importantly, you're then able to take that content and show it back to the rest of the community, and indeed build it into when at the holidays you're asking subscribers to give the gift of Vogue to another friend of theirs, a family member, a colleague. You can show the example of the woman who was given a copy of the magazine by her grandmother, and that it meant everything for what she thought it meant to be a woman and to be dignified and to be in the community as this perfect expression of what a woman could be, and how that meant something to her, and ask people to give their own gift and to be the one to give that experience for someone. That's about getting the business done that you as marketing professionals need to do, but doing it in a way that feels human. And so those social aspects of the relationship are incredibly important. The third thing I want to leave you with, and before I wrap up, is the notion of balancing the art and science. And I think especially in this industry that relies on the notion of people valuing the expression and the nature of the intimate relationship they have with your products, is to figure out how to balance the art and the science of your marketing. For us, on the campaign and across lots of different projects, that's a difficult thing to do sometimes. Sometimes you feel like you have a great idea, and we're going to see obviously lots of great ideas here today, but it can at times feel like the great idea is less connected to the business reality than it might otherwise be. Similarly, everybody knows the analysts and the data nerds at their job are completely focused on the science and making sure that you're getting the most number of conversions through your e-commerce, or making sure that the sales are moving the way they need to move, in a store. But to figure out how to balance the two of these things so that you're putting art and science together and where they can live in harmony is actually where a campaign sings. And so for us on the campaign, that meant making sure that our fundraising was not just something where we were scorching the earth with tactics to trick people into making that last contribution, the sort of digital equivalent of the direct mail piece that you get from a nonprofit that sort of feels like a bill from the IRS. A lot of people get tricked, and there's a high conversion rate on those things, but it's a small and near-term conversion rate that doesn't last over time in the relationship. In the case of Vogue, those asks about the giving the gift of Vogue or renewing your subscription based on these stories replaced what was essentially the digital equivalent of the flyaways that fall out of the magazine that say Vanity Fair extra for $1. That didn't have the notion of the brand and carry through that relationship. And so to figure out how to make sure that you're producing content that is adapting to the digital moment where brands have to start producing content on their own and to be as good or better than what's being produced by the journalists and media outlets and other content producers around you, but then to have that connect in a scientific way with data and an understanding and a notion of an individual person and the relationship you have with them to drive the individual business outcomes that you need is the essential challenge of the digital moment right now. This is a different venue for me to speak at than my usual talk to political people and nonprofits. But I hope everybody goes back to work after participating in this program, understanding that this is not a technical challenge that we have at this particular moment. All of our organizations have to adapt not to technology or the platforms of the moment or Facebook or even Google. These things are fleeting and ephemeral, and people use them in different ways. Google's introducing new products, Facebook's evolving, MySpace is barely even here anymore. The essential challenge for the digital age is how your organization is going to relate to people, because there's a massive opportunity there to engage them in a way that is customized to them, that is intimate, that is social, and that is ultimately very meaningful for them. And that's something that isn't a technology decision to be made by your IT department. It's not even really a marketing decision to be made at the copywriter level or the individual campaign level. It's a leadership challenge, it's an organizational challenge, and it's a cultural challenge that's one that all of us are being presented with, whether we're a political campaign or a brand or a magazine or even a university. So thanks very much, and I look forward to the presentations.